gentlemen, welcome to Daventry on a very nice night. I'm sure you'll be very warm. Right, members, is it your wish I sign the minutes as a true correct record of the previous meeting? Agreed. Thank you. Apologies for absence, please.
Apologies for seeking absence, Bob Patrick's, Mark Wesley and Gavin Henry.
Thanks. I think we're a full house otherwise, aren't we? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Members' interests. Disposable interests? No. Don't forget you can disclose them at the time if you feel you have any. Party whipping arrangements? No. To members of the public, that means we don't get back together as political groups beforehand and decide how to vote on things. Right, members, the current position is 6% and 86%, so not much different from last time on the applications. A bit of housekeeping to read out. If the alarm rings, if you could please exit through the way you came in. It won't be a test, it will be a genuine alarm. Please switch your mobiles off, which I haven't done yet. I shall do in a second. These proceedings are being recorded. Speakers will have 3 minutes to speak. After that you'll hear a tone and be asked to wind up. And that is the only opportunity you have to speak, so please, if you wouldn't interrupt on the rest of the debate. I'm sure you're not going to clap, hiss, cheer, boo or stand up and wave your arms. During the meeting you'll see officers along here talking while you're talking or while somebody's talking, which looks like incredibly bad manners. We have to do that in order to get the answers to what point you're making at the time. If not, the meeting will go on till midnight. I think that completes that part. There are no applications withdrawn, so we go straight on to the first application, which is 00077, which is in Halston. Gentlemen.
Good evening, everybody. This application, made by David Wilson Homes, is for 54 dwellings on the outskirts of Duston in Halston Parish. So within an allocated site, as you can see on the screen here, that's the M4 allocation from the joint core strategy. I've shaded in the top corner in yellow. Hopefully you can see there. That is the site in question that we're discussing this evening. The application being brought before you this evening due to objections. They've been from Harleston and Harpole Parish Councils, as well as South Northamptonshire Council and local residents as well. There's been 3 main strands to the objections received, which are as follows. They are related to the principle of development, primarily because there is no master plan in place, which policy M4 of the Joint Core Strategy says there should be. Infrastructure concerns fear that the impact from the development might not be adequately mitigated. And then aspects of the design and layout. And 2 that I'll pick out, which came up several times, are flats on the corner of Whites Lane and Harleston Road, and the boundary along Harleston Road as well. Now, in response to those 3 strands, referring back to the principle again, if we could go back to the first map, please. Just the way. Now, N4 of the joint core strategy does indeed say there should be a master plan. And there isn't one in place at the moment. We have taken the view as Daventry District Council that because of where this site sits in relation to the rest of the M4 allocation, it is physically divorced, you call it self-contained from the bulk of the rest of the site, and on that basis we feel we can take the application and consider it in advance of the master plan coming forward, because as you can see there's a significant amount of the rest of the allocation still to be delivered, which is together rather than divorced as this site is. Because immediately to the west you've got a plantation, immediately to the north you've got a tree belt and New Sandy Lane, to the east you've got the currently under construction Dallington Grange, and to the south you have the open space area and the outskirts of Dustin. So yeah, we feel that the small parcel of the N4 allocation will not prejudice the wider sustainable urban extension as and when it comes forward. Referring to infrastructure and the concerns that have been raised there, just want to try and reassure members and members of the public that this scheme will be paying its way. It's not getting off lightly in terms of contributions. It will be required to pay SIL, Community Infrastructure Levy, and Section 106, and the sort of draft heads of terms of the Section 106. So this is in addition to SIL payments, relate to affordable housing, primary education, open space maintenance, highways and libraries. And if you look at the wording of policy N4 of the Joint Core Strategy, these are the sorts of things that is how they envisage the allocation going forward. In respect to the design and layout, there's been several discussions with the applicants to try and improve this, because there were some concerns with the initial version, where in particular the Harleston Road boundary had a close bordered fence along most of it, which we didn't feel were particularly good. So that's been changed a few times now, and we've now got the situation. In fact, if we could get the boundary sheet plan, that would be useful. I hope the colours are showing clearly enough for you there. Last screen has gone off, hopefully you can still see that one there. The eastern boundary of the site along Harleston Road is now proposed to be a mixture of railings around the flats and stone walling, with the exception of the pedestrian lane, which is almost opposite the Downington Grange site. So we feel that's an improvement, and you probably see from the late reps that the landscape officer's made comments now and is fairly satisfied with that boundary. We've also included chimneys because there was probably a valid criticism that originally there weren't any chimneys proposed on the properties, and there now are. So to summarise, we feel that despite the master plan not yet being in place for the M4 SUV site, we feel the application can stand alone, and it should not prejudice further development within the sustainable urban extension by virtue of how divorced it is from the rest of it. If it being more centrally located, I think we're probably looking at a different argument altogether. But importantly, it will bear infrastructure costs through SIL and Section 106. If I can refer you back to the late reps again, obviously there's additional responses from consultees, landscape officer I've just mentioned. An important point to mention on there is that the Environment Agency, at the time I wrote that late rep yesterday, had withdrawn their objection. As of this afternoon they have, and they are now content to impose a condition in addition to the ones that are already suggested in the report. I've also suggested changes to some of the conditions as well, you'll see in there as well. So coming to the recommendation, it's revised slightly from what's on your report because the EA issue has now been resolved, and the recommendation is to approve subject to the Section 96 agreements and to conditions revised as per those revisions in the late reps list. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have three speakers. First of all, Mr. Dobbs, who's against the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillors, the West Northampton Joint Core Strategy took years to deliver key principles in providing housing and green space. That drive resulted in N4 SUE, which you've seen, of which this application is a toe in the water and the predictor, I suggest, of a major gathering storm, since it spans 3 local authorities, 4 landowners, multiple developers and 2 parishes. Under those threatening storm clouds, which in N4 would see Harleston increase tenfold, we should be able to rely on the strategy as our umbrella, protecting the rural nature and tranquility of our village, while still delivering a programme of development of sustainable homes. I ask you to consider the following impact factors, which will occur with varying degrees of velocity if you do not delay or defer the proposal, and I highlight 8 of them. 1, you would be perceived as riding roughshod over the Joint Core Strategy, which requires an overarching master plan yet to be delivered. I can understand your hesitancy in refusing a planning application for fears of expensive legal challenge. In this case, I suggest the strategy should protect you from such a challenge, even though this involves not following the advice of your case officers. 2, you would set us up for potential future applications, failing the requirement to be joined up, and without the required infrastructure to serve existing and new communities. Sustainable it isn't, and infrastructure there isn't. Ask where the residents of these 44 houses can be buried if they want to be. There is no space, there is no provision. 3, you would endorse an illogic in the case officer's report, which seems to justify an essentially urban design for what should be a rural-urban mix by saying that Harleston Manor, which you approved, is already urban and the rest of this issue probably will be too. Please don't make us urban for the sake of convenience and haste. 4, Daventry District Council might well be perceived as an authority which cares little about those who reside in its boundaries, taking all the financial benefit from unprecedented development and leaving the consequences to others. 5, the transition between the rurality of Daventry and the urban scene of Northampton will be a totally inappropriate 3-storey block of flats opposite Harleston Firs, the frontispiece of an uninteresting and unimaginative street scene wholly alien to the beautiful parish it extends. 6, you would be endorsing a system that's meant to involve local people, a way you gave but 6 working days for us to get our heads around the final iteration of this application. 7, you would be hampering the current and future ability for the local community to make the best ethical and appropriate planning gains needed to plug growing gaps left by the haste or panic to build. And finally, 8, you would leave a whole section of your community who live on the edge of your district feeling let down and abandoned when here tonight, without huge risk of legal redress, you have the authority and gift to say no, not yet, not until all the safeguards which cannot be described in 3 minutes can be met. To conclude, it worries and confuses me and many that our neighbouring planning authority, which shares jurisdiction on this issue, takes the opposite view that this is not a standalone development, and I suggest that the proposal before you don't cut the mustard in terms of design and fit. For all these reasons, I urge you to be courageous, to do the right thing, be seen to do the right thing for our district and community by not approving this proposal at this time and deferring it to resolve the issues I've raised with what I believe are good defensible grounds. Thank you for listening.
Here. Thank you. Mr. Dackham, representing the parish council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The decision you as members make tonight isn't solely for the development of 54 houses. In actual fact, you are making a decision on the first phase of the delivery of one of the largest and most complex urban extensions in the district. And as with all first phases, how it's dealt with, how it's delivered, will set a precedent for the remainder of the development. So, how does this first phase sit within the context of the overall development? Simple answer is we don't know. The parish council have no idea, your officers have no idea, and most importantly, you as members being asked to make a decision on this phase have no idea, because despite what the policies in the joint core strategy state, there isn't a master plan for the SUE, there's no design code to steer the look, feel and form of development, there's no plan for a strategic or local highway solution for the SUE, and there is no mechanism for securing on-site facilities and infrastructure. Yet, your officers are asking you to make what is an irreversible decision to permit the first phase of the development, frankly, with your eyes shut and your fingers crossed. Now, your officers, and maybe some of you will think, well, it's only 54 units. What harm can it do? However, if approved, what's to stop another application of 50 units? I mean, you've already approved one scheme of 54 units. Why didn't you approve ours? Then an application for 100 units comes in and they say, well, you've already approved 104 units. Why not ours? All in the absence of a master plan and all without proper and sound planning input. The final line of policy N4 of the joint core strategy, the policy specific to this urban extension states, development proposals must be accompanied by a master plan, not should, as your officer stated. Yet, despite this adopted policy, publicly examined and endorsed by Daventry District Council, we have before us a recommendation for approval for a scheme that clearly contradicts this fundamental principle. Just consider what signal that sends out. Now, South Northampton Council are absolutely right in their comments. To permit this scheme now would fly in the face of the fundamental purpose of the joint planning unit, undermine the credibility of the joint core strategy, and set a dangerous precedent for the remaining delivery of the site. Whatever you think of South Northants, that alone should be setting alarm bells ringing for you as elected members. So, you've got a choice. If you approve this, you're making an irreversible decision, one that will set a precedent for the future delivery of the SUE. A huge risk that much needed on-site infrastructure will not be delivered. What contribution is this development making to on-site community centre, the on-site school, not just monetarily but in terms of land provision? Or you could actually draw a line in the sand and say that in the absence of any master plan, you won't be approving this application. You want to ensure that the impacts are properly planned, properly mitigated against, and that as a council you want to see the delivery of development despite delivering the best quality environment, not just to be fairly satisfied, as your officers just stated.
Thank you. The third speaker is Mr. Colson, who's the agent.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, we welcome the recommendation of officers before you, given their extensive pre-application involvement with DDC over the past 15 months. In terms of a background, as pointed out by the previous speakers, the site comprises a small parcel on the north-east extremity of the Northampton West SUE, located between Whites Lane and Harston Road. The Northampton Kings Heath SUE lies directly opposite, which is currently being built out. As already noted by the Parish Council, Mr. Dodd's policy N4 does state that development proposals must be accompanied by a master plan. It is understood that this work is being carried out by the Joint Planning Unit, but no meetings have been held, and certainly David Wilson Homes haven't been asked to attend any meetings or workshops as of yet. Notwithstanding, whilst for the bulk of the remainder of the SUE master planning will be highly relevant, there are several reasons why this site should come forward now on its own. Firstly, the physical characteristics of the site. As stated, the site is located in the north-eastern extremity of the SUE. It is bordered by Halston Road to the east, Whites Lane to the north, Properties Industry to the south, and the Slate Pit Plantation to the west. It has no physical link to other parts of the SUE, so in effect it sits on its own. Secondly, the formal pre-application with Daventry DC. Based on detailed pre-application discussions over the past 15 months with DDC, officers have agreed to this site being, and I quote, distinct and set apart from the rest of the SUE allocation so as not to undermine the delivery or master planning of the wider SUE. Any early application would help to kick-start the delivery of housing in the area. Thirdly, given its physical characteristics, the site does not rely on main infrastructure improvements to come forward, hence it can be delivered now. On this point, and whilst this is the case, the development will be liable for SIL, and as you would expect, and all other matters relating to paying its share of the main infrastructure requirements under Section 106 on a pro rata basis in relation to the SUE. In conclusion, there are no technical objections to prevent this application coming forward. Officers of DDC agree that this site can come forward on its own for the reasons laid out in the committee report. The Planning Commission will allow early delivery of this part of the site without prejudicing the remainder of the SUE coming forward. Given this background, I think we can agree with the recommendation in front of you.
Thank you. Local member, Councillor Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. I think to start I should say that obviously as the local member I have been to parish council meetings where this application has been discussed, and also I have once met with the developers with the parish council, but took obviously a back seat in those meetings. The MPPF states planning decisions must be taken in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. I think we're all fairly familiar with that. And it also goes on to state that only policies that provide a clear indication of how a decision maker should react to a development proposal should be included in the plan. We have a plan, as has been mentioned by a lot of people, and it's the vision of a number of authorities. Daventry being one and South Northampton being another one. I cannot get my mind around the fact that two neighbouring authorities come to a completely different conclusion when faced with the same set of information. The policy clearly states that development proposals must, not should, and I think it's disingenuous of the officers to suggest that it should, may or might. It must be accompanied by a master plan. There's no room for wriggle, there's no room for debate. That is the policy. That is the policy that's been agreed by Daventry, South Northampton, and all the other authorities that have been involved in this. It's been consulted on and we all agreed it. So therefore, on the first hurdle, I would think that this is grounds for refusal of this particular application. The Strategic Development Framework, the SDF, which seems to be an almost secret document that is being worked on by various authorities, which is the master plan, we think, is being done in secret. We've tried to find out about it. David Wilson, who are actually building part of this area that should be involved, were not even invited to attend the meetings that have been taking place. So, and the parish council have not been involved in this. Therefore, it's difficult to say with any certainty what this strategic development framework is likely to be, might be, could be, or will be. I think that, excuse me, I'll just look at a reference that I made. in the report on page 25, the officer writing the report has said, in the absence of a master plan, the application has to be considered on its own merits. Well, that's clearly not the case, because it has to be considered on the merits of the policy. And the policy says there must be a master plan. So I shall leave that alone for the moment. The second part I'd like to talk about is Section 106 agreements. In this particular instance, the parish council have been, I think excluded is quite a strong word, but have not been involved in the discussions regarding Section 106. They have not been offered the public open space maintenance, which I believe is the right of every parish council of every development. And this treatment was also handed out to Harleston in relation to the N7 SUE, where they were told by officers that it had to go to a maintenance company. They are now trying to revisit that particular decision as well. And I think it is quite beyond comprehension why the local parish council has not been involved in the Section 106 agreement. As has been mentioned, the infrastructure is not in place to even handle these 54 in the Harleston district, when you bear in mind that N7, which is on the other side of the road, is, I can't remember, I think it's 200 houses, and the existing Harleston village is 174 dwellings. So they are more than doubling it with these two planning proposals. And there is nowhere for these children to go to school. It says in the report that Duston Eldene is full. So where do you bus them somewhere? Harleston is nearly full and has its own problems with parking and parents not taking consideration when dropping their children off at school. There are a whole host of infrastructure problems that have not been addressed, which should be addressed by the master plan. Also, it would appear that the proposal is very, when I say inward looking, inward towards Northampton. There is no connectivity in any great shape or form towards the village. As I said, with the Section 106 agreement, it may be that the parish council want a new village hall to accommodate all these people. Where has that been talked about in previous Section 106 or even the current one? What about pavement and lighting so people can walk to the village or the pub? When the parish council would talk to some of the people in N7 who have moved in, there's been a whole host of problems there that the people there didn't know who to turn to, and they were talking to Dustin about it. They had no idea that they were part of Harleston Parish Council and that they had a whole rural outlook to look forward to. So they need to look in a different direction, not inward to the urban extent of Northamptonshire. The other aspects which have been touched upon regarding the design of the application, we had exactly the same problems at Buckton Fields. The corner plot, which is the most prominent part of this whole application when you drive down the road into Northampton, is a 3-storey block of flats. I cannot believe that planners in any way, shape or form can think that that is a suitable plot to give the transition between the rurality of the firs and the plantations around there and the suburban part of Northampton. It's a disgrace. It happened at Buckton Fields. We negotiated with the people there, the officers got on board with that, and it was changed so that there was a less prominent building on that corner. It just gives people the wrong impression. N7 is very, I suppose you call it urban, but that's because the planners let that through and it's set a precedent. Even though this is a different SUE, obviously as its opposite, it takes its references from there. So I think it's important that the whole design is looked on as a rural frontier rather than an urban frontier. Some of the planting that has been discussed is a bit ornamental and should be more rural in its character. I could go on, but I think I've run out of energy to do so. But I think you can tell that there are significant issues with this planning application, which means there needs to be further discussions taken to sort these out. David Wilson have been quite cooperative in the past, but they need to be a bit more cooperative so that we can draw this to a conclusion. Why there is a 2-metre fence down one side, I've absolutely no idea. It just seems ridiculous, especially if there isn't one on the other side of the road for exactly the same type of houses. Anyway, I would like to propose that we defer this application until further discussions have been made between officers, the parish and the developers, and that a master plan is brought forward which, as our own policy N4 says, must, and I keep repeating that word, but there's no wriggle room with that, is there? Must be accompanied by a master plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Would you like to speak now?
Just briefly, I mean, my colleague here has covered it very comprehensively, but I think the lack of wriggle room with the word must is the indicative argument here.
Okay. Officers, would you like to comment on it so far?
I think the message is coming loud and clear. I mean, at the end of the day, the starting point with determining applications is quite rightly the development plan. That is the policy, and members have also expressed concerns about conflict with that part of the policy. But there are other material considerations, and those material considerations are basically the site itself and the nature of the site, and the fact that it's quite self-contained in terms of it doesn't prejudice the layout or the master planning of the remainder of the M5 site. That said, members have also expressed concerns about the detailed design and layout of the proposal, and are perfectly entitled to do so. I'm not so sure about the master plan aspect of it. Certainly, relatively speaking, this is a relatively small, well-contained site. So I don't know what a master plan for this particular site would do in terms of sort of promoting how this particular site is developed. Bearing in mind, this is the application site, this is the application for the council. That said, the issues that the members have expressed with regard to the transition between the rural countryside, etc., and the design, layout, and landscaping are perfectly legitimate concerns to make. And clearly, members don't want to go to the position of refusing the application, which is why they're seeking to defer it. And if that's what members vote on, then clearly we'll have to go back to the applicants and see whether or not we can amend the design and layout, etc. But I don't obviously know how a master plan for what is a relatively small site would, what benefits or what objectives it would achieve. There may well be scope for further statements in terms of providing assurance as to how this sits relative to the allocated site, and that's certainly something that can be discussed. But I think there's enough discussion and enough views expressed by Councillor Frenchman to give officers a lead in terms of going back to the applicants, should members decide to defer the application rather than determine the applications.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, I have a certain affinity for the joint course strategy, since mine was some of the blood on the carpet on the night when we agreed to adopt it. I have a couple of questions, really, that we might seek advice from our legal representative, or we might not need to. I understand the concern about the absence of a master plan, but the master plan is for the whole of the development, not just for this little bit. And the master plan, presumably for the whole of the SUE, would include a description of how the necessary infrastructure will be provided. And it's clear that in the absence of such a master plan, there is some nervousness about how these people will be provided for, since there is not yet, as yet, no clear indication as to how some of those needs might be met. I'm thinking of things like school, medical support, and even, as was hinted at by Mr. Dobbs, am I allowed to call him that, this evening, about the disposal of human remains. These are serious matters that occur to people. So I'm a bit unsure about how strongly we could play the absence of the master plan. The second thing that worries me slightly is I want to make absolutely certain that everybody in this room understands that this N4 is part of the Northampton regional development area and not part of the rural countryside. And I think we have to be careful how we balance that. This is a proven need for the expansion of Northampton and they haven't got room, but at the same time I understand the nervousness of those who live within the parish of what the transition from their rural idyll to the expanded Northampton should look like. So I'm still slightly on the fence, or should it be the stone wall now, but it would be helpful if we could get any guidance at all as to the strength of the argument about the master plan for the whole SUE, and also the exact position of the SUE and this site within it as regards the NRDA, the Northampton Regional Development Area. Because I can see that this is an isolated site because of the slate copse, or whatever it's called, plantation, I beg your pardon, in between it and the rest of the SUE. But nevertheless, that might be just taking advantage of that fact to get this done before it really ought to be.
Any other comments on that?
Shall I start off with the first one, and perhaps leave the planners to deal with the NRDA one? What we're dealing here with is planning policy. We're not dealing with interpretation of statutes or regulation. And so debates about must, should, may, might, while interesting, are not entirely appropriate in this case, where we're not interpreting regulations. And if something's in a regulation that says this must happen, it must happen. If it says it must happen in a policy, the consequence of not having that in place is that there is a conflict with policy. And there is no dispute from the office, as the office has been quite clear, there is a conflict with policy to this extent. This would not be the first, nor indeed I suspect the last time you actually find yourself in a position where you might be looking to approve an application where you were in conflict with policy. In terms of it being a particularly strong argument in terms of an appeal, which could actually flow from a deferral, because deferral would place you in a position of a non-determination, I don't see that as a particularly strong case. There may well be stronger cases in terms of how this site sits within the open countryside areas, which is moving more onto your issues around the NDA. So I think that's a good point to hand over to the office.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
The book is over to you, sir.
Well, it's not quite the book, but I mean, I think as been indicated, this is an allocation as part of the Northampton growth. So it's part of the, I want to use the word, the urban sprawl that is the growth of Northampton. And I mean, in terms of the principle of development on the site, I think one would have to say that there's very strong policy support for it. That said, members have indicated concerns about design issues with respect to the transition between the urban growth area and the surrounding countryside. And perhaps that is something to be looked at, because members have indicated they don't wish to refuse the application, but have expressed a desire to go back to the applicants and look at that aspect of it. That's something we can do. Whether or not it results in a reduction in the number of units or an alteration to design, that would be a matter of discussion between the applicants and officers, taking on board the debate that members have had this evening. As Simon's intimated, there's no guarantee that the applicants will simply say, yeah, that's fine. They do have a right of appeal against non-determination and are perfectly entitled to take that up if they feel that the council is unreasonably stopping allowing the development to come forward in statutory time periods, etc.
Thank you, Aaron. Councillor Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I've picked up on a number of comments by various people. I don't agree with the speaker that Daventry doesn't care too much about what happens on the edges of the periphery, but we care about everybody. I do agree regarding the block of flats. I use Chipkin Estate and Middlemore as an example, where you could say quite a worthwhile estate of reasonable quality is overshadowed by blocks of flats at the entrance. Not a good look. Transition was another thing, and we talk about is it urban, is it rural? Well, back in the day, I can remember arguing with the WNDC at the time about transitional from the graveyard, which is over there, through the development, which is now home base. They didn't quite agree with me, but I think this has a right to be transitional between urban and rural design. I pick up on SNC and DDC, well, not for the first time that we've disagreed on a number of matters. However, I'm leaning towards my colleagues. Another comment was that, a comment was made about self-contained. Well, a 6-foot fence around adds to the point that it would be self-contained. I would lead to, I think, legal advice, but at the same time, I don't think that I'm willing to accept this application in the form that it's in at the moment, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bull. Councillor French.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's fair to say that Harleston have played along very nicely with both SUEs, the N7 and now N4, and as much as they agree, I won't say agree, they accept that development will take place there. But at the moment there is 250 odd houses being built and they've had not a penny of mitigation, not an ounce of community benefit has flowed to the village in any way, shape or form. And I think it's about time that that was brought to a halt. And that's one of the reasons why I would like officers to renegotiate Section 106 and all the other items, because the infrastructure for the living conditions of these people has not been agreed and needs to be agreed. I think that as I said earlier, the control of the public open spaces is something that the parish council are keen to have, but officers apparently said that wasn't they weren't able to. I wasn't involved in that. I've only had second-hand confirmation of that. But also, and this is the one that I think it is this transition between the rural and the urban. I think just to say it's an extension for the NRDA is really disingenuous, because it still has to blend in with the countryside and people see it every day. And the last point I'd just like to pick up, which is one that the legal advisor said, I think it is slightly misleading if our own policy says something that people take it to mean one thing, but it actually means something completely different. People read that it must have, and they think that it must have, not that it might have, or it could, or it should.
That's what I said with respect,
Well, that's not the impression I got from the listening.
Hold on, one person at a time.
I apologise if that's the case, but that was it appeared to me that you were saying that it might say that, but because it's only a policy and not a regulation, it can be circumvented.
It's a conflict.
Again,
Well, then it shouldn't have been passed by the inspectors.
through you, Chairman, the starting point is the policy. The policy says what it says, but you have to consider other material considerations. And those are the considerations that are specific to this application site, and you weigh those in the balance. There is a conflict with the policy if you read the reference to development proposals must include a master plan. But weighing against that is the nature of the site itself. It's a very well contained, self-contained site. It is contained visually and physically by the plantations. And in terms of its impact, that has been assessed by all the statutory consultees and by officers and judged to be acceptable. Where it is unacceptable, there is mitigation in the form of SIL and Section 106 contributions to secure and mitigate the impact of the development. So in terms of the effect of this development on its surroundings, it has demonstrated that it can be made acceptable both by conditions and by the Section 106 agreement and by the SIL. And I should point out that the SIL, a proportion of that will actually go to the parish council directly, there to spend. And if they have a neighbourhood plan, that percentage actually goes up, as I understand it. So there is, you have to look at the impact of this development on its immediate surroundings. In terms of pursuing Section 106 contributions, you must make a direct link between the impact of the development and its surroundings in order to secure those contributions. The tests for 106 are extremely stringent. In our view, what we're pursuing as regards this particular application satisfies those tests. And that is a matter for the District Council taking on board the comments of statutory consultees, including the Parish Council, but it is the District Council who is party to the Section 106 agreement, unless there are specific reasons why other parties should be party to that agreement as well.
Thank you. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Chair. One of the statements which I don't fully understand is the assertion by the officers that the development will not prejudice the development of the rest of the N4 site. In the absence of a master plan, I don't actually understand how we actually know that. We have had Councillor Frenchman and the representatives from Harlestone making quite a number of criticisms of the nature of the development. I would guess if we had had a master plan and there had been discussion with the parish council in the formation of that plan, is it not the case that we'd probably have a different proposal that was being brought tonight that would already have addressed many of the concerns that have been raised? I'd be interested to know if we go down the route of saying that we are deferring a decision on this, to know where the master plan is. There have been suggestions that discussions are taking place, but the parish council hasn't been involved. Where is the discussion? At what stage are local people going to be consulted on this? And when are we likely to have a master plan in place so that we can take things like this forwards?
Again, Chairman, through you, I can't give you a definitive timetable other than to say that, as you can see from that allocation, the application is before this council tonight for determination is the area shaded in yellow. In our view, that site, its development, will not prejudice the development of the remainder of the site based on assessing the planning merits of that particular application. As I say, members are perfectly entitled to come to whatever decision they choose. But officers are satisfied that we have weighed the proposal against the development plan policy that refers to the need to have a master plan, but also taken into account other considerations which are material and relevant to the determination of the application, which is the comments of statutory consultees, including Education Authority, Highway Authority, etc., etc. And on the basis of its particular merits, we are content that the application can be determined. That said, members have also raised particular specific comments about the detailed design of the proposal, and you're perfectly, again, entitled to come to a conclusion on that. You have obviously expressed a view that this proposal, the site should be more transitional in terms of how it fronts onto the remainder of the rural parish of Harleston to the north-west. And that's something that may well be taken on board. As I say, in deferring the application, there's no guarantee that the applicants will come to the table, as it were, perfectly entitled to exercise their right to appeal against the determination. That's a matter for them. But as I understand it, the area of land to the north is fairly well screened. You've seen from the photographs that the character of this area is changing as a result of the growth of Northampton, and that it is taking on a more urban area. But as I say, members are entitled to come to a view on the detailed design aspects of the proposal.
Okay. I've got at least 3 more speakers down. Councillor Organ, Councillor Lee Swift and Councillor Charncliffe. And I should go back then to the proposer, and then I should take a vote on it, because I think we've been discussing it long enough. Right, Councillor Organ.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. It's always a frustration when we don't follow policy. It's caused us problems before when policy isn't followed, and therefore we're trying to create conditions and mitigations against a master plan that doesn't exist, and there doesn't seem to be order or structure or strategy, which is something that we should be majoring on as a council and as a governing body in the area. We should have these master plans, we should have these strategies, so we can fully understand how the developments fit in. Even though this is right at the edge of N4, it is still part of an overall strategy, or should be part of a strategy, that we can understand how it fits in, not only with its neighbourhood, but with its own self. And so, therefore, I think we should be concentrating on getting the master plan, getting the strategy right, so therefore we can then move forward on the various developments that will encompass N4 over the next few years.
Thank you. Councillor Alex.
Yes, I am very puzzled, but I will try to, if we all agree that that field will be built, one form or another, we are now arguing about the quality of the building and a master plan, the existence of master plan. The existence of the master plan will, unfortunately, it's all about the school, the surgery, which is very, very important. And if it would be on appeal, that bit of land will provide the provision for the master plan, albeit it would have been done before, but it will help towards the master plan. And because it's on the edge, we might have a difficulty on planning term to go. The officer said it's against the policy, and we all agree about that. Now, it's which degree it's against policy. Now, what I am listening to what the parish said, they have few problems besides the fact of the master plan. One is a flag, and some is a fence. But if the fence and the block of flag will be ready for discussion, because the officer spoke about section 106, so we have already cleared that. If the fence or the boundary treatment and the flag could be subject to a condition, will it be for the ward member and the parish a situation that they would like to be in? Thank you. I will leave it at that.
Thank you. Can I go back at that point, Chair?
Yeah.
Just on the issues raised about the flats and the fence. The fence, as it originally was along Harleston Road, that's no longer what's on the table. Following discussion with the applicant, the Harleston Road boundary is now proposed to be railings around the boundary of the flats and also a stone wall to improve the appearance. Because originally it did come forward as a fence, but we didn't feel that was satisfactory. With regards to the flats, we've explored options in terms of how we could maybe change the appearance, reduce the heights of those, and that actually didn't look any better. It looked a lot worse. It looked like someone had squashed the roof if you tried to make it lower. We've got the streets and elevations in front of you there. You'll see on the top left, the top alignment properties is what you'd see from White's Lane. So the left-hand corner would be what you'd see as you approach down Harleston Road. The third row down, you can see the flats on the right-hand side. That's what you can see along the Harleston Road boundary. It's not come up too well because of the size. Perhaps we could zoom in a bit to the third row. The boundary trees become a bit clearer rather than just big black blocks. Probably shows it a bit better. So you can see, to the right hand side there, that is where you have the railings. That then becomes a stone wall where the houses begin. We can scroll to the left, so we go along that elevation. Another section of railing there where the footpath link from Harleston Road goes in, then it returns to stone walling again. Just as a principle though, in terms of the design approach, we've taken the view that because this is an extension to Northampton, we're not aiming to design it like a village. It should be an urbanish, or at least an urban transition type design. And I'm mindful also that if you travel to this site from the north along A48, you will see the Daventry Grange scheme before you see this one, because it is so well screened from elsewhere. Hence, we felt we were happy with the flats in their current form. And it wasn't what we're trying to see if there could be a redesign to sort of overcome concerns raised by the parish and residents, because we're well aware of them. We think we've achieved a good solution on the boundary of Harleston Road, given the constraints of the site. Clearly, the flats are what they are, and we feel that with front doors on them as well, which perhaps the examples refer to not much more than the other development you refer to. I'm not sure they have doors which front onto the main streets, which this does on both sides, so it does have active frontage and footpath links. There's a footpath link onto Harleston Road from it, and then there's also a front door on the White Lane side as well. So it's not an inactive frontage of just windows and nothing going near it. There are footpath links as well.
Thank you. Two more speakers, and then we should go to the vote. Councillor Chandler.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to make two comments for members. One is, I do not accept the argument about establishing a precedent. Every application must be dealt with on its own merits. And the other point is that it's one of the duties of elected members to try and help the people they represent to understand things like what is the difference between policy and regulation. But the members are supposed to understand that clearly.
Thank you. I'm actually grateful to Councillor Ritchie, because I think some of the points that he brought up about the precedents that this will set, I think I disagree with what Councillor Chandler just said. If this goes ahead with a block of flats on the frontage there, every other application that comes along could be encouraged to do exactly the same. But if they see that we're against the urbanisation of that particular corner and the edging of the whole SUE, they might think twice about it. So actually it starts to set a precedent the other way, if you like. The more I hear about it, and the boundary treatment is another one, because it's looking more and more like Colditz than a housing development. I just don't understand why you have to have a 6-foot wall down a full length of road when there's nothing on the other side but greenery.
It's for the gardens.
Well, so that is part of the bad design. They should have been designed the other way around, so that they didn't have to have that wall at the end of the gardens in that way. I don't know where we stand, but I'm actually now regretting saying about deferring it. I'd quite like to suggest that we refuse it.
Absolutely.
Can I have less comments from it? It's unhelpful.
I was about to suggest that. Please don't clap or make comments as in the worst, and I wouldn't want to. You'll have to go out the room.
Do you want to change it?
Well, we have a proposal to.
Can I withdraw that?
Which has been seconded, which I want to deal with first. Correct, Mr. Lawyer?
Can I withdraw
Well,
it?
if the proposal and secretary choose to withdraw it, then that's up to them. Well, I think what's being asked here is, can we withdraw it and re-propose
If you've withdrawn it, then the chairman will see the proposition.
Okay.
In that case, I'd like to withdraw that, and my seconder agrees with that. And we'd like the proposed refusal now.
And I'll second it.
For what reason?
A, that it contravenes our joint course strategy.
Yeah.
Secondly, for design and what's the yeah, I don't know. We're talking about the design of the block of flats and the wall down the Harleston Road. Their design and layout, I guess, aren't they? And also, and I know Eamon was against this, but Section 106, I want that looked at again so that the parish council are involved and get what they're after.
That must be irrelevant if you're refusing it.
Yeah.
Okay, then I'll thank. Well, no, because we accept that it's going to be built on. We're just not happy with this particular plan.
Yeah,
so there will be a Section 106.
It's still being refused.
Okay, but I'm trying to give officers the heads up that the parish council, both on this and future applications on SUEs, need, and I will use the word must be, involved in the Section 106.
We would like all parish councils. I would like to see a system where any application that comes in, and I'll talk to you about it before, Councillor Fraser, whether they support the application and whether they don't, whether it's 5 houses, 50 houses or 1,000 houses, so whether they agree with this or not, but somewhere in the parish council's comments it will say, in the event of the application going ahead, we as a parish council would like this, that and the other to be considered when the 106 agreement is drawn up. I would like very, very much for our parishes to do that, and I'm sure the planners would be interested and the council will be interested in the parishes asking for that beforehand so that can be considered.
Well, I would like to point out that Councillor Miller has given various advice to various parish councils about the involvement of the parish council in these discussions, if you like, and when various parish councils have tried to be involved, they've been told that they're not welcome. And I'd also point out that if you take Malton as an example, Jane Austin there, who is a full-time clerk for the planning interests of that of Malton and Overston, she gets considerable additional benefit out of developers by talking to the developers with the council at a very early stage, and it appears that further round the boundary that is not being encouraged, and I'd like to find out why.
Well, it should be encouraged that for parish councils, even if they don't support applications, to say, should the application go ahead, this is what we would like negotiated
Too late.
on our behalf.
It needs to be done earlier than that.
Well, you can't do it much
earlier.
earlier than when you get the planning application.
Yes, you can.
Well,
That's the whole point of it.
We're not arguing that point now.
Chairman, could we argue about this later?
No, it's a very fundamental thing. It's a very fundamental part of planning that this planning committee and the planning officers seem to disregard the views of the parish councils at an early enough stage.
This particular.
I think we should.
Well,
It's for public matter.
I'm sorry, but we won't be talking about it this moment. We're talking about this application and should it be refused. You've got a reason for refusal that's been seconded. I think we've had enough debate on it, and I think we can vote on it. All those in favour of the reason for refusal, please show. How many to get? 8? 8. Those against? 1. So the application is refused for the given reasons.
Chairman, can I clarify what those reasons are? I mean, I've got conflict with the joint core strategy. Presumably that's the allocation and the lack of a master plan.
That's it.
And then secondly, I have comments in respect to the design of the flats.
Yeah, and the road.
Design and layout.
The design of the flats.
And the road.
Chairman, can I simply, for my benefit, because it is officers who will have to draft the reason for refusal and subsequently defend said reason for refusal. So I just simply want to clarify that there are 3 points of refusal. First is the conflict with the allocation due to the lack of a master plan. The second is the design of the flats. And the third is the layout with respect to the boundary treatment to Harleston Road. Those are the reasons for refusal.
All the ones that we're putting on here, yeah.
Great.
Thank you, Chairman.
Those are the applications refused. We move on to the next application. if I get the page I'll allow a couple of minutes for people from Martin to go.
That's the only reason we signed up to it.
Okay, we start again then with 0142, application in Abbey Town.
Thanks, Chairman. And the location plan, for those of you who know Daventry, this is the former job centre on the corner of Oxford Street. James Street, I think it is. The application, the building itself has been vacant for some considerable time. The application seeks permission to convert the building from A to a house of multiple occupation, comprising 25 effectively living bedrooms with shared facilities, kitchen and communal facilities. As you see from the location plan, the site is restricted in terms of the space around the site, but it is on the edge of the town centre with very good access to the amenities offered in the town centre, including public transport, shops, leisure facilities, etc., etc. In planning terms, the site obviously is within the limits of the town. It is a residential use, and as such, in principle, is accepted. A little while ago, we had a training session on houses and multiple occupation, which I took members through. I unfortunately advised members there wasn't a policy in the joint course strategy that mentions houses and multiple occupation. There actually is a policy, and it talks about setting presumption in terms of managing housing stock and allowing for houses and multiple occupation, provided they do not adversely impact on the character or appearance of the area. The proposal before members involves a straightforward conversion and no physical alterations to the exterior of the building, only fairly minor changes in terms of providing a secure entry and exit from the building. And although it sits within the conservation area, we would suggest that in dispensing your statutory requirement to consider the impact of development on the desirability of preserving and enhancing the appearance of the conservation area, the proposal preserves the character and appearance of the conservation area. All told, and in summary, the site for residential use would provide reuse of an existing building and also contribute to the housing need across the district by adding to the variety of residential units that we have. Accordingly, recommending the application be approved, Chairman.
Thank you, Raymond. We have two speakers. So Mrs. Randall, representing the Town Council.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Committee. You may recently remember, those of you that were on the committee not long ago, that this application came before you and it was to change of use to become a private gym. The Town Council objected against this change of use, the main reason being no parking provision. Since then, the building has remained empty, and now you have before you an application for it to become multiple occupancy. Again, the Town Council objects to this change of use, and again, parking is one of the main issues. After reviewing the parking survey, we still strongly object. Residents having to walk streets away is not satisfactory to park their cars. Also, since the last application, things have changed within the town. Last time the application came before you, you heard that there would be parking available at Tesco car park. This has now changed as Tesco have now put a restriction of 2.5 hours onto their car park. So that already means that approximately 100 employees of the town centre are already seeking to park their cars elsewhere. So it may be that these streets allocated in this application are already being used by employees of the town. The other concern that we have is with waste management facilities, especially if the new proposal to have 3-week bin collection is granted, with a recycling system as well. You saw in those photographs that there are parking provision, but that is not for that building, that is for a building next door. There is no outside communal area, and a lot of those rooms are purely for a bed. It does state in the proposal that this would be for young professional people. I would not really think that it would be adequate for anybody actually just to live with a bed as a room, and especially not for a young professional person. So some of the bedrooms do have a bed and a bathroom, and if you're really lucky, you also get a sitting area. So I would urge the council to review this application, as I have strong feelings over the health and well-being of people who are going to live there, which is one of our statements, and also the impact of the parking provision of the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Randall. Mr. Gavin is the agent.
Thank you. The old job centre has been marketed by Drake Commercial for a total of 2 years for lease and for resale, with no success. The agents themselves can't see any other use of this building that is viable to purchasers or people to lease. I refer you to their letter, which was sent on the 2nd of July, and the environmental plan. Proposals will make reuse of vacant buildings to provide accommodation for professional workers. Unfortunately, some people tarnish HMOs as antisocial places, but the reality is very different, especially for our properties. We have never had an out-of-vote or an issue with any tenant. If there are any concerns in relation to the level of accommodation service that we provide, then I would like you to view the photographs of recently completed projects in Northampton, some people have available there. So the level of accommodation we provide far exceeds most owner-occupier homes. In terms of design and layout, we have provided mainly ensuite rooms which exceed minimum size requirements. For example, rooms of 16 to 18 metres squared, where the requirement is 7 to 10 metres squared. We took note of the Town Council's letter and comments in response to this application, and as such, we have decided to break down the building into 4 more manageable and secure units. Design, layout and facilities on offer here exceed the amenity guidelines for HMO dwellings, and as well as further support the MPPF guidelines for private sector housing, and help reduce the shortfall in quality affordable housing that is on offer today. Parking is obviously a concern. This is why we have carried out parking surveys and provided evidence of HMO users who drive or own a car. The figures speak for themselves, and we would ask that you take the needs of people to be housed in good quality accommodation over the requirement to have a parking space. Waste collection, we have made inquiries with commercial waste companies, and they are happy for collecting the waste commercially and providing the right facilities for refuse and recycling. We've spoken with the fire and rescue service and local officer who is have no concerns on the proposal we are representing. And security for our tenants is paramount, and as such we will adopt a CCTV camera system with the supervision of the local crime prevention officer. We hope that you take a sensible view on this application, and we look forward to bringing high quality affordable housing to Daventry Town Centre for key workers and professionals.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman, can I just come back to, refer members also to the environmental health officer's comments on the late representations, where they confirm the need for licensing, and also the need to comply with space standards and fire and rescue regulations, which clearly are also regulations that sit within the planning system. And as members will no doubt be aware, planning decisions should not stray into other areas where there is already regulation in place. So in effect what I'm saying to you is that this is a residential use within the town. There's presumption in favour of said residential use, and issues about space standards, fire, etc. are already dealt with under other regulations. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Are you happy, sir, Councillor Paul?
No, she's in Scotland under the thunderstorms at the moment, Chairman.
So you put your hand up to speak as a committee member. Okay.
I think I'd like it recorded that for once in my life I've agreed totally with Councillor Randall. this is really a step too far. We're looking at 25, 26 bedrooms, potentially 50 occupants. Parking is absolutely abysmal. The residents in St James Street have difficulty parking outside their own houses. Problems are exacerbated by the deliveries of HGVs to Aldi, where at times the back end of the trailer, because of the parking problems, the back end of the trailer is within inches of people's living and bedrooms. Long stay parking is available, yes, out of town, but when I talk to the store managers and store staff within Daventry, I wouldn't want my staff to walk all the way down to the long stay car parks after work. There are some allocations behind Boeing Square for parking, but the idea that the parking is not a problem is ridiculous in itself. Waste and commercial waste. There are more than one example of the abysmal use of commercial waste in the town centre. Not all residential, but a portion of it is residential. Whether they are the responsibility of the landlords or the residents therein, it doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is that the spillage of waste in those areas does absolutely nothing for the town. Security. We've heard that CCTV cameras will be installed. Well, I welcome that, but I don't know for what reason. Councillor Randall brought up about Tesco's parking. Yes, they've introduced automatic number plate recognition cameras to make sure that the 3-hour parking limit is adhered to. We only have parking attendants once or twice a week for the odd hour. But, you know, an Arab report going back a number of years concluded that parking would be a problem within the town centre. It's bad enough for, you know, the people that work in the centre. I personally think I welcome this application if it was on the edge of an estate, if it was out of town. But to be in the centre of town for up to 50 occupants, and even if I said half of them had a car, and we're talking about 25 vehicles, that's a lot of people to find some parking spaces. The adjacent roads, London Road, double yellow lines. If you go back to Kingsley Avenue, Oxford Street, again, more problems. Chairman, this is a step too far. I would like to go against officers' advice and propose that we refuse the application.
What reasons have you got, Councillor?
I can't say overdevelopment, but I can inappropriate design in the town centre. Inappropriate design, lack of parking, lack of commercial waste facilities.
Hold on a second. The highways have said it's okay, so that will be difficult
Well,
to use.
the highways, unfortunately, don't live in Daventry town centre.
I know, but that will be difficult
We
to
have
defend.
consistent arguments with highways.
We
both
do indeed.
Urban area and rural areas.
We do indeed. I'm just reminding you
Of course,
as an officer
I know.
we'll do in a minute.
And I respect your reminder, but multiple occupancy of this type is certainly, I'll think of an answer or a planning
You won't
reason.
get a second to it.
Yeah.
You've got to give a So I'll let somebody else speak before
Yes,
you
indeed.
come up with a reason. I won't ask for a second yet. All right, Councillor Erlingsworth, I think. Sorry, Councillor Brenton.
Thank you, Chair. That plan on the screen, that's the ground floor, is it?
Yes.
So that white space
Correct, Chair.
is the outside area.
That's correct.
Where are the bins stored?
Just
Three little blocks there.
that's the cycle area.
And so how do you get to it? Is there a door, is there an entrance to that back area?
Yeah, there's a side entrance just to the
That-
bottom left-hand side.
So whose responsibility is it to take the bins out?
The
commercial
management
people-
company, the management company through you, Chairman, who would manage the units.
Okay, thank you.
And as I say, commercial arrangements would
Yeah.
exist.
Councillor Erlingsworth.
Yes, last time we had a very good session about HMO, and we were told all the in and out of planning reasons why it's a good idea, why it's not such a good idea. But regarding the parking, which seems to be the only reason that some people argue against a planning application, we have been told that just 7% of people who live in HMO have cars. So, and because Highway haven't objected to the plan, and as you say, if Highway hasn't objected to the plan, we will have a problem. I will propose that we go with officer recommendation, and we accept the HMO. Thank you.
Councillor Erlingsworth.
Can't do that just yet, Chairman.
Sorry?
You can't do that just yet.
No.
You created a problem for yourself, Chairman.
Somebody else.
You deferred on Councillor Paul's proposal to get a second, and now you've got a contra proposal. So,
Well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to take your proposal,
Yeah.
Councillor Erlingsworth, yet. I deferred the proposal on a person of my word. And
yeah.
and
So you would need a secondary.
I shall keep to that one for a start. Okay. Have you got a reason yet, Councillor, or should we?
No, I'll wait for others to speak.
Well,
I'm
I'll
also,
give you another.
I'm also minded, Chairman, that, you know, if this was the corner of the street in Brixworth, Brixworth would be up in arms. There is no logic. There are times when I could say overcrowding of a building, then environmental health will say, well, they've all got the right living spaces. But for a resident of Daventry and for the parish council of Daventry to come out wholeheartedly against this application, which is clearly a meaningful development in the wrong place. What planning can be on that?
I think nobody would argue with the point you're making as a local member.
Right.
I think any local member would make the point that you're making, whatever village or whatever place it's in. The only difficulty you've got, and you know well enough, because you're vice chairman of planning for quite a time, you know that the only argument you can use is your parking reason, and you haven't got a statutory body to support your reason.
I come back on parking issues, Chairman, and you know, parking issues on, let's say, Middlemore, Timkin and Lang Farm, where the planning regime at the time was where you could have 1.5 parking spaces per building. We now have a problem on those estates where emergency vehicles, refuse collection vehicles, delivery vehicles can't move around those estates because of on-street parking.
And it's the same in the villages, and it's the same in the
Well,
whole
exactly.
country.
So isn't it about time that we, as a district council, made representation to correct it?
Probably to the national government would be something. Anyway, but I'll tell you what, as somebody else wants to make a proposal, I'll give you to the next speaker's finished to give a reason.
Well,
If you
I
can't
cannot come up with a planning reason that would hold up in a court of law.
So is that for you withdrawing your?
Are you withdrawing then?
Can I just, before he does, can I just add a point that might help clarify something, Chair?
Well, I'd like to get this point cleared up first.
Well, I'll defer to my colleague.
Right. Well, after that, I want you to withdraw it then. Councillor.
Chair, again, it looks like good quality, looking at the photographs of the previous development, but it is the parking. But with the local highway authority, they do say here, therefore you may wish to satisfy yourself that an increase in demand for parking will not have undue amenity. So there isn't an unqualified support from highways. They want us to look at the parking issues and make give a view on that. And 7% of 50, if that is the case, I think that might be, I'm not too sure how accurate that would be. There are going to be a lot of vehicles there, and the concern is how will that extra vehicles impact on all the other residents? Because I don't think the local highways authority give an unqualified support to the plan they want us to have it. Now, is that how it's for you? Sorry, Chair.
Again, Chairman, members are perfectly entitled to come to irrespective of what statutory constitutes. The fact is, this site is on the edge of the town centre. It doesn't have any parking provision on the site. But it used to be an office employing up to 60 odd people with the comings and goings. It still could be an office employing 60 odd people with the requisite comings and goings. It could, as far as I'm aware, I don't think it's got any restrictions on the hours and days of operation. So you have a building which could go to another use, which could have just as much parking issues. But it is a town centre location. People wishing to either live here will be looking at it, caveat emptor, buyer beware. You see what's there before you. You see where it's sited. If you've got a car and you don't want to go there, you won't go there. You've also heard the evidence that only 7% of people who go into these units use cars. So, the issue is that in town centres, it's not ideal. You can't provide parking for every town centre use. But as a planning authority, you should be heading towards sustainable development and promoting other policies that encourage different modes of transport, etc.
Can we as a council then look at parking permits for the existing residents in Warwick Street, in Oxford Street, in St James Street and in London Road?
With respect, Chairman, we're here to determine this application before members, and our advice to you that on its planning merits it is acceptable. And it will provide a contribution to, obviously, desperately needed sort of housing market. It contributes to the breadth and width of housing tension that you have across the district. Whether people have different perceptions about its impact is another matter. There are other regulations that control the space standards, etc. They sit out with the planning system. This is residential use in a town centre. Is it acceptable or not?
Okay, Councillor Ball, back to you now. Are you withdrawing your proposal?
Under pressure, I would like it recorded that under pressure and very reluctantly, I withdraw my proposal. And I would also like it recorded that I would be seeking a motion to council that parking permits are issued to all residents within the vicinity of this establishment, purely and simply because, I've seen it happen in a little town in London.
How much they cost?
Sorry?
We're going through a system in Longbury where people they have to pay for them.
Yes, I'm happy. I come from a town called, a little village called London where you have to pay for parking permits.
Yeah,
and even as a visitor, I have to pay.
Anyway, you withdrew your application. I'll come back on you, Councillor Irving Swift. You would like to make a proposal.
So we go with officer advice.
Oh, sir.
Thank you.
Again.
Yes, sir, you'd like to speak.
I was going to propose that we reject the application if Councillor Poole is not going to do it. But let me give my arguments. I'm not swayed by a lot of nice photographs of what other buildings look like we know the age and the nature of the building that is going to be converted. We can see in the diagram just what the size of some of these rooms are. Very little room, other than having a bed and a shower cubicle within the room. This is, the size of this place. We're effectively talking about a hostel. Okay, perhaps a sort of upmarket hostel. And I think that it is good that we have such places in Daventry. There is a need for accommodation, particularly for people who cannot afford anything else, people who may be young, who may be looking for their first place to live independently while they're working in the area. I think that is all. These things are important. The 7%, though, that has been quoted as the average number in homes of multiple occupation who have cars. I assume that is a national figure. I would imagine that most such establishments are in the centres of large towns. If you're in the middle of London, you don't have a car. If you're in the middle of Manchester or Birmingham, you don't actually need a car. Here we're talking about Daventry, where people probably, we don't have the same range of public transport, we don't have the same range of facilities that people want to travel to the leisure time. You're going to have a much higher proportion that are going to have cars. Now, we want to attract people into the centre of Daventry. One of the attractions we have at the moment is that we have got free parking. But there is little value in having free parking if you can't actually find it. I travel into Daventry most days and want to find a place to park. At busy times, it is very, very difficult to get into the car park in St James Street, unless you're prepared to wait in a long, long queue to get around there. Very difficult to get into Bowman Square, unless you're prepared to wait for an awful long time. Now we've heard that there are restrictions on parking, at Tesco's, which was the only large car park that very rarely was completely full. I just found that there is no way that this fits. I'm not against the idea of having a hostel to accommodate 26 rooms, potentially twice that number of people. I think that there may be a need for that, but this is not the place for it.
I think you
Can I quickly come back, Chairman?
No, hang on a second. I think it's unfair to call it a hospital. It's a HIMO. It's a house in multiple occupation. That doesn't mean necessarily a hostel by you saw pictures. 20 years ago, when I was housing chairman, I saw some awful HIMOs. Yeah. I think we've moved on since then. And we're looking at, well, we saw some examples of this particular applicant, other places. And that's the sort of place we expect to see nowadays. We don't expect to see the HIMOs of the 1970s that were very problematic.
But with respect here, the more high quality this is, the more likely it is that the people who occupy it are going to have cars.
No, that's not true.
Yes, but you...
Chairman, can I come back and hopefully kill the debate? I've said that I would withdraw. Your vice chair, I've withdrawn because I can't think of a planning application which will stand up at appeal.
Yeah.
Your vice chair has agreed to go with offers of advice, quite rightly so, and that is what is on the table. As much as I don't like it, that's where we are.
That's exactly right, and I would expect you to vote against it.
I will vote against it, but your vice chair and yourself are absolutely correct.
Okay, we've got a proposal that the application be approved according to officer's advice, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those against? 1, 2, 3. The application is approved. Presumably the rest were abstentions.
How many abstentions, Chairman? Sorry. How many abstentions?
2, I believe.
2 abstentions.
2 abstentions.
5, 4, 3 again.
2, 3, 4. Yeah, well, I didn't vote anyway, so only vote if it's... Okay, that application is approved. Right, the next application is in Malton 0404.
Thanks, Chairman. It's Apex Park, Chairman, Abbey North.
Abbey North. Sorry, I'll try to get too fast.
Is that a basic feature?
Yeah, that's it. It's in Abbey North. I do apologise. 0378. I've got a tap system and I lost the tap.
Thanks, Chairman. For those again, I know this is part of Daventry. It's part of the extended Heartlands industrial estate, which has been extended over 2 previous phases. The 3rd phase having been approved by the West Coast Development Corporation. Subsequent applications have varied that application for effectively 3 large B8 units. This application relates to one of those units. Relates to one of those units, which is built and ready for occupation. However, the applicants have found up an occupant who falls within use class B2, which doesn't actually fall within the remit of the original planning permission. That said, in planning policy terms, a B2 use within an extended, long established industrial estate is in principle acceptable. However, the Highway Authority have looked at this application on its merits, and given the nature of the B2 use with various shift changes, etc., have identified a need to secure contributions through 106 agreement towards the local public transport system in terms of enhancing existing bus services so that they cover shift changes, etc., and deliver a choice of mode of transport to and from the estate. With that in mind, officers are recommending the application be approved subject to the 106 agreement. Our understanding that the contribution would be up towards a maximum of £120,000 over 2 years to cover the costs of delivering an enhanced bus service. But in principle, we don't have a problem with that, and accordingly recommend the application be approved. Chairman, subject to the 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. No speakers. The local member is Councillor Ritchie on it for.
I'm very happy, Chair, with the recommendation of the officers.
Are you proposing?
I would like to propose that yes, there should be.
Will be accepted.
Yeah.
Councillor Bob, are you seconding?
Yeah, I would like to second it. There is a need for smaller units, and it's not being rude because Prologis executives are used to me calling them Prologis sheds, but there is a need for smaller units within the larger units for small to medium enterprises. I would like to add, Chairman, that I was at the opening of the adjacent building this morning for Element Worldwide Logistics, who have made Daventry their hub in this part of the world. An extremely prestigious company, worldwide, as I've already said. I welcome it. The only downside, sorry?
You're seconding there.
Yeah, the only downside, Chairman, is when this application went through for Apex Park under the WNDC, or under the auspice of the WNDC, I and Councillor Over made great play that the exit should be onto the A45 with the addition of a new roundabout. What we've got now is an emergency exit for or emergency entrance for emergency vehicles on the A45, and all the traffic from this road has to be funneled down through to Brunel Close to a small set of traffic lights. That's the only disappointment, but I'm happy to second it and welcome it.
Thank you. Right, we have a proposal that's been supported and seconded. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. 10 minutes. Thank you, that application is approved. Now we'll get to Malton, the one I tried to get to before, which I do have a tab for. 0404. Over to you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. This application relates to Stocks Hill in the village of Malton. See the location plan there. Some members may recall there was a previous refusal from this site last year for 2 dwellings. This application is now proposing 1 rather than 2. The key issue to call up here is although it is reasonably close to the centre of the village, it's actually beyond the village confines. It's within the conservation area, but it's beyond the village confines, and is therefore determined to be in open countryside. If we can look at the elevations of the dwelling itself, please. So that's the dwelling that's proposed, and I have no particular issue with the design of the property. I think it actually looks quite pleasant. But the key issues, there's sort of 2 key issues here. One is the principle of development, with it being beyond the village confines, and also that we've met and exceeded our 5-year supply for the rural area, and the applicant hasn't demonstrated any exceptional circumstances in relation to policy R1 of the joint core strategy. The second one relates to harm, which is reduced compared to the last application for 2 properties, because it's now only 1. We can look at one of the photographs, please. It's an outplay. So it's reduced from the last application in that there's no dwelling now proposed to be where that tree is shown on the photograph there. However, that tree would still come out as part of the proposal. We consider that the application does not preserve or enhance the conservation area. Those concerns have been echoed by our conservation and landscape officers, who are concerned about the loss of the tree shown there and the extensive hard landscaping which would sort of urbanise the countryside location. If I can draw your attention to the late reps, I've made a slight error and I've made reference to policy H2 in a few places, which needs to come out and relates to affordable housing, which isn't relevant in this case.
Not very affordable.
No. There have also been some additional letters in support of the application, which will see the issues that have been raised there. However, that doesn't alter the recommendation to refuse the application for the reasons shown, minus the policy H2 mentioned. So the recommendation is to refuse permission based on principle and harm. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have a speaker, and I shall never get his name right, but I think Jablonski or something like that. Very close to that, isn't it? A man renowned for his chimney designs. That's 3 minutes.
Members of the committee, Chairman. This application is for 1 house sitting some way behind the buildings on Stocks Hill and not visible or significantly intrusive in the views between the dwellings fronting Stocks Hill. Officers claim that the site is an important space because it allows dramatic views across open countryside from the centre of the village. If you looked at the plan of the entrance, you can't see much countryside, and it's not very dramatic. The existing trees and shrubs along the southern site boundary block any such views. I think the officers need to update their appraisal of this site because we're being judged on a false premise in that particular respect. And I note that the village design statement has omitted its map of prominent views from its pages now after it was reviewed last week. The new house occupies an overgrown area of green wedge which makes no significant contribution to the conservation area. Is there a picture of it anywhere? It's in a very overgrown, there it is. This is an area that the parish council would like to see developed rather than left as scrubland. The new development would include the restoration of some brick outbuildings on the site, the repair of the dilapidated walls, not that one, somewhere, that one there, that's to be renovated and put back to use. Repair of the dilapidated stone walls around the site, and to provide off-street parking for the residents of the houses that are already there. All of which would improve the amenity of the residents and of the conservation area. Our proposal has been discussed and agreed with the parish council as we went along, and it meets their multi-development plan in that A, the house has been well designed in line with the parish council's suggestions, B, the scale and character of the house is appropriate, C, the parish council considers that the open land of particular significance is not affected, even though it is in the green wedge. D, it enhances this part of the conservation area, and B, it improves the amenity of local residents. So I think the views of the parish council, as discussed in the earlier application, should be considered when making your assessment of this scheme.
Thank you, sir. Local member? Who's not here? Sorry? Of course, there's no local member. Right, members. The plural. Councillor Osborne, you were just a split second before Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chairman. I actually, it's not just a swear about it, but I do agree with the officers. I think the view from the front where you see the tree as you look through, I think it's beautiful. And I just think that there's no way that we can approve this application due to everything that's listed here. So I propose that we go with officers' advice and refuse this application.
Thank you. Do you have a second? Councillor Charlton, you wish to speak now, Councillor?
No, Chairman.
No? Okay. Right, Councillor Robinson, you had your hand up.
I was just, Chairman, thank you. I'm just reading the summary and looking at the number of policies that this one actually goes against. I think any applicant's going to have his work cut out to get it through. If half of it's true, then it's not going to get through.
If half is true.
I didn't say the other half wasn't true.
I didn't like the comment. Right, any more comments?
If half we had one,
Proposal that the application be refused for the given reasons. Been seconded. All those in agreement, please show. Right, that's unanimous then, is it? Nobody against? That's unanimous then. Okay, the application is refused. Right, the last application is here because it's one of our own. It's with the applicant. Over to you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Chairman. I'll refer members to the late representations and the final pages of the late reps. Basically, we'll be providing an update on highways matters, flood risk and ecology. Essentially, I'll summarise these. The issues with regard to all three can be dealt with by way of condition, or will be dealt with as a result of the ongoing wider development of Mongsford under other reserve matters. As the application states, it's a reserve matters application for the construction of a single-storey, 1.5 entry school. The principle of development has been established, obviously, as part of the wider Mongsford approval, and essentially this application seeks to provide or secure the approval for the details of the construction of the school and its associated games areas and play areas. Just going to leave one there. So the school itself, the building is sited off the dam-burst area or flood risk area, and that will form part of the higher land within effectively within the limits of the approved development. The playing fields, over the 2 league playing fields will also be in that higher land. The smaller playing field would be on the effectively the floodplain area, but itself will also be raised so that it's actually mitigated against any potential flood risk. And that was one of the concerns from the Environment Agency, which has now been addressed. In overall planning terms, the proposed design, it's a functional building. It is what it is. It sits within the limits of the approved development. There are no technical objections to the application to the whole permission for reserve matters. Accordingly, we recommend the application be approved, Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have a local member or not? You are a local member, Mr. Councillor.
Yeah.
Right, you can speak for 30 seconds.
Obviously welcome the application. I'm not happy regarding flood area because I'm still waiting for the developer to raise the ground level in and around this application. But there's no reason to refuse it against that. It just means that we need to keep on at the developer to raise the ground level above the flood or the desired flood level, anticipated flood level. Excellent application, Chairman. I disagree with the Town Council's assumption of how it's going to be paid for, but that's not part of the application. All in all, wonderful. Happy to recommend approval.
That's a proposal, is it?
Yes, it is indeed.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Frenchman.
I'm happy to second that if that's okay. Just a couple of quick questions because I got confused between all these schools that we may be building. Why isn't the LEA doing this? Is this the one that they didn't want, or is it?
As I understand it, Daventry, but my understanding is Daventry District Council took on the responsibility to actually deliver the school,
right?
Actually, in consultation with the Education Authority. It's effectively implementing the 106. It's being funded through the 106 agreement. Right. So Daventry District Council felt that we need to deliver it and take on the project.
So it's what is this what's called a free school then?
I think it's will be a local education authority school.
But
obviously it's being delivered by Daventry District Council.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. I'm happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor.
No, I was just
you were going to do.
I was going to second, but I got beaten out by this.
Can I briefly come back, Chairman?
Oh, sorry. No, speak
I of course support this, but just a couple of concerns that I have. It may seem that some of us have a fixation with parking, but in many other schools, when it comes to the time for children to be collected, it is horrendous, and particularly for people who live in the vicinity. I just want to be absolutely certain that these things have been thought about, and there are designated parking places. I know there is a difficulty in trying to provide parking places that may only be used at 9 o'clock in the morning, 3:30 or so in the afternoon. But there should at least be some plan about how parents coming to collect children are going to be accommodated. My second concern is that there will be people who attend the school who live in Lang Farm or Sowerfield. There is therefore the question of how they actually cross a busy road. The older students will not all come be delivered by parents. Whether within the funding agreement there should be some provision. Some have suggested traffic lights, pedestrian traffic lights. I'm not all that fussed about pedestrian traffic lights. They're not foolproof. I don't know if the topography of the area allows an underpass or some other way in which children can safely pass from one side of the road to the other to get to the school.
Again, through you, Chairman, to do with the first matter of parking, as you see from the late representations of other area highways, the developers, Crest Nicholson, and the local planning authority, planning officers who have seen the delivery of the we're sensitive to the concerns of the highway authority. Actually, on that layout there, you'll see sort of the community centre, the shops, etc., just to the north of the school. with lots of parking in there. And the aim is to provide sufficient parking to deal with the issue of drop off and pick up. I mean, that's only one aspect of it. The other is the management of the school itself in terms of how they encourage people to come to schools, and the wider education issue in terms of using other modes of transport, the old sort of school trade where parents can volunteer to escort children, etc., in a train manner. As regards the wider pedestrian traffic lights, I mean, I can only say that as part of the Monksmoor urban extension, the impact of this development of the wider road network, including Welton Road, which was presumably the road over which people would travel from Lang Farm, will be dealt with. I can investigate with the office concerned whether or not there is provision in there to provide crossings into and out of Lang Farm, but ultimately, this is a reserve matter for the details of this particular school. All the other matters will have been dealt with as part of the outline permission and the continuing detailed development of Monksmoor as part of that outline permission. So they will be coming before members in due course. For example, the community centre and other phases that are currently being considered by the council.
It won't be forgotten. Councillor Paul, you want to make a quick comment?
All I was going to say, if members that were talking about the Harleston application, if they are minded to drive past the entrance to Monksmoor, then I think they would be more than pleased if that type of entrance to the Harleston development could be achieved, because this is, I believe, absolutely exceptional, and particularly the stainless steel work of art that is inside, just inside the development.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. Right, we have a proposal the application be approved, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show. Unanimous, 10-4. 10-4, the application, not 10-4. That concludes the planning committee, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your attendance. Please,